From a height of 2,600 feet, the northern part of Israel lies in the palm of one's hand. When Egypt's President Nasser first visited the Golan Heights and saw the Israeli settlements down below, he laughed and said, "You don't need guns to win a war here. You just have to roll a few stones." The Golan Heights capture newspaper headlines and edition after edition of the news. Yet, it is only a small speck on the map, 69 by 20 kilometers or 41 by 14 miles. Superimposed on the map of Kansas, you'll hardly see it. Its only importance comes from its position in relation to the Israeli settlements down below, within gunsight of Syrian forces. A cannon on the Golan means a shell into Israel's towns and villages. Thousands upon thousands of Israeli citizens have had to live in the shadow of that threat. The heights, mostly rock formations, basalt lava, were never heavily populated by the Syrians. Until 1967, the Syrians saturated the little area with hundreds of guns, tanks, bunkers, and troops, all facing the living rooms of the Israelis down below. The northern part of Israel, the Galilee, is the granary of the state, the most fertile part of the country. Here, every single inch of the soil is cultivated so that the land may yield its precious produce. For the people who farm that land, the Golan Heights have a rather special meaning. One of the farmers who lives in a kibbutz in the Hula Valley is Dan Lanner, a general in the Army Reserve.
Well, in my case, the Golan Heights is rather a personal question. I live in this valley for 35 years, and up to the 67 war, I had the big pleasure to being shot at, well, quite a few times. And as a farmer, I like to till my fields without any shooting going on. But I don't think that will be possible without the Golan Heights. We had that before.
For the 19 years preceding 1967, tilling the land in the Upper Galilee involved armored tractors and air raid shelters, as plowing, sowing, and harvesting were occasions for continuous barrages of Syrian shooting and shelling. The Syrian army knew what a valuable strategic and topographic asset it held. So close to the territory of Israel, so high, so well fortified. By holding it, they held the power to create havoc and to disrupt every normal activity of the Israelis below, forcing mothers and children to flee into cement air raid shelters underground at any given moment. Bombarded with hundreds of shells, the number of settlements affected grew from day to day. Losses of life and damage to property kept increasing. And then there was the water, so precious an element in that part of the world. 30% of Israel's water for irrigation and drinking comes from the Sea of Galilee. It enters the Lake Kinneret from the Jordan River, which is fed by the Banyas, Hasbani, and Dan rivers. The Syrians tried to divert these waters and to deny them to Israel. Israel devoted enormous amounts of money and labor to its national water carrier, which takes the water of Lake Kinneret to every corner of the state. but the Syrians prevented the construction of a power station which would have enabled Israel to harness the waters of the Jordan before they plunged into Lake Kinneret. As a result, Israel was compelled to pump its water up from a depth of 200 meters below sea level. Then, after 19 years of such continued harassment, the Syrians changed their tactics and decided on a frontal attack. They had a name for their plan. It was Amaliyat Nasser, Nasser's operation. The objective was to cut off the Galilee from the rest of Israel. 40,000 troops and 400 tanks were deployed by Syria on that northern front. The Syrian fortifications on the heights had been good and ready for years. To repel the Syrian assault, to defend its citizens and its land, Israel paid with many lives. One doesn't have to be a military strategist to understand how difficult it is to operate from below when the enemy is attacking from above. When the Six-Day War was over, for the first time in many years, Israelis in the north started to move freely above ground. Israel now held this vital piece of territory, and its farmers could plow, sow, and harvest in peace. But not for long.
No!
On October 6, 1973, the Jewish Day of Atonement, the Syrian army, with more than 1,000 tanks, broke into the Golan Heights, threatening to flood the northern post of the country and to penetrate into the heartland of Israel.
Well, I fought in the north about 3 wars, but the most intensive war and the most difficult war was the War of October 73. The reason for that war being so difficult is how it started. Well, it's not a secret. We have been surprised thoroughly, but well, we are not the only ones. Everyone has been surprised once. And so our standing army, which everybody knows is very small, had a very hard job to do, and the reserve army had to go into the fighting piecemeal, and I think which you shouldn't do, but we didn't have any choice. And up to the time we went over to the offensive, in the north it was on Thursday, it was rather a very difficult time and very hard fighting.
This commanding officer was at the head of his men, holding the line at the western sector of the Golan Heights.
I think it was a very hard, very tough war. In the first days, we knew that we fight here with few tanks against all the Syrian army, thousands of tanks. We knew that in the back of us there are all the kibbutzim down in the valley. We knew that all our families are in the back of us. We fought with, as I say, few tanks. Many of our commanders and crew members were wounded or killed. Tanks of us hit by the Syrian forces. I think that our soldiers stood with their bodies. We say they fight with their teeth, with their nails, to stop the Syrian corps, the Syrian forces.
Hanging on by their teeth and by their nails, youngsters 18 to 21 years old, doing their military service, were finally reinforced by the reserves, often their own older brothers and fathers, and the Syrian onslaught was repelled. Israel heaved a sigh of relief and shuddered with horror at the thought of what might have happened if that same attack had been launched from the pre-1967 front line.
If the October War would have started at the old borders pre-67, in the same situation, that means complete surprise. Well, I rather prefer not to think about it, but some points are very clear. First of all, we wouldn't be sitting here. Now, the easiest thing is to take a measurement from the border of 73, before the war, and to the point of the deepest penetration of the Syrian forces till Sunday up to 11 o'clock, and transfer that measurement to the borders from 67 and see how far we go. I think we would have stopped them somewhere west of Tzfat and somewhere west of Tiberias. We would have lost the Hule Valley, the Jordan Valley.
Losing the whole northern part of the country would have meant that the reserves, their operations disrupted, would have arrived at battle lines in the heart of Israel, and the bloody fighting that took place on the Golan Heights would have raged in the towns and villages of the Galilee, reducing them to ruins. How would it have ended? Some in Israel are more optimistic than others.
Well, I think we would have pushed them back. The same thing which we did at the Golan Heights. But the damage would have been terrible. I mean, all that valley, including women and children, and we would have been in a very, very bad situation after the war.
Syria's President Assad.
إنني أريد الجولان بالكامل وأريد
I want the Golan Heights. He wants the Golan Heights. Why? Is it in order to launch another attack, better situated again, freshly rearmed, and to cut off the northern part of Israel? Or would he be satisfied in shelling the Israeli settlements from above, just as his army had done for the 19 years preceding 1967? We asked some non-Israelis, a group of uncommitted Americans, on their acquaintance tour in the Middle East.
I had done some studying about it at home, but you have to see it in person to really believe the strategic value of the area as high as it is.
Well, the heights are obviously important. I mean, you come here, there's a valley down there, and if you put guns here, you can shoot down there. But I've spent a week in Egypt, and now finishing up a week here, and I would like to think that we could move beyond pieces of territory.
There's no doubt that secure borders are important, and this is definitely one of the places that needs to be secured relative to the safety of the Israeli people who live in the valleys, the Hula Valley and so forth on the other side.
Well, with the settlements here, I don't think Israeli negotiating position would be to give back the Golan Heights. I don't think you're about to give it back anyway.
Would you?
No, if I were Israeli, of course not. There's no question about it.
How do you feel?
I agree with Ernie. I think that it's very important that Israel have the advantage here in the Heights, pending any final solution to the whole situation here. And I don't foresee that, at least in the short range. I would hope that it would happen.
Oh, I agree with what's been said. I mean, the Golan clearly gets to be the ace in the hole for any kind of peace negotiations for Israel. It's a very strategic position here. I can't see giving it away without a peace treaty, without a sounder definition of peace than what you know today.
إنني أريد الجولان بالكامل.
I want the Golan Heights. Is this the voice of peace?